Joining us now, State Senator David Hann, who is also the minority leader of the state Senate. The Republicans are in the minority there, of course. Senator, how are you?
I'm good.
Good morning.
Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me. I guess I'm here for the news quiz. Is that?
No, that's a.
Well, we'll quiz
this
you
is
about
now it's
things that you were intimately involved in.
Oh,
because
well, that's better. Then I'll know the answers, I hope.
Well, maybe.
Because
Mark Dayton doesn't.
You and other legislative leaders met with Mark Dayton, the governor, to kind of work out when the special session would be for the storm money, and also what would be covered as far as what taxes get repealed. And what we learned is that nothing. The only thing that came out was September the 9th would be the date that you meet, if you meet.
You've agreed on a time and a place, but that's about it.
Well, that's it. We had a meeting on Friday, which was just the five of us, just the governor, the two leaders from the other side, and Representative Dowd and myself, and we met with the governor, and only about an hour, so we were a little, I guess, skeptical that we would solve all the issues that we wanted to talk about.
Was the governor there?
Yes, he was.
No, I know physically he was there, but was the governor there?
He was there in person, live,
just staring out the window or something.
And he was very cordial. And we presented him, and people have seen the letter that we wrote, but we talked about we certainly want to do the disaster relief, but there are three taxes that were either mistakenly or stupidly passed by the DFL majorities last year and have been very harmful, we believe, to the economy, and they deserve to be repealed. And we propose that we take those up as a part of the agenda and repeal them.
Well, and the Pioneer Press editorial board agrees with you.
Well, I think everybody agrees. Even Democrats agree. Governor and others have talked about how these taxes are not very good for a healthy economy and that they think that they should be repealed. They're just not sure when. And I think that's the sticking point.
What's changed between now?
What's wrong with immediately?
What's changed between a few months ago when they passed these and now?
Well, I think the only thing that's changed is that as they've passed them, the opposition has grown to the taxes, and I think that they just were not. They just were not as focused on the opposition when they were trying to get their budget done.
Now let's talk about the opposition. We have pretty much every interest group, and interest groups get a bad name, but interest groups are essentially a bunch of people who are interested in business together, and they pool resources to be more effective. But you've got the Minnesota Association of Realtors, the Cable Communication Association, Farm Bureau, Minnesota Grocers Association, Retailers, Trucking Association, Warehouse Association, National Federation of Independent Business. Essentially, if you have an interest in Minnesota business, you're against these,
right?
Which we'll get to, the business taxes.
I think, and one thing I pointed out in our discussion with the governor is I have not gotten a single email from anybody saying let's keep these taxes. Not one. I know that's a shock, but I haven't gotten any.
Ben, do you have the audio clip handy of when he was confused about?
Yes, let me set this up. Governor Dayton, a while back at Farm Fest, said that he was talking to some farmers, and it turns out this tax on farm equipment repairs is a bad thing in his mind, that the legislators made a mistake, and if we do have a special session, we should get rid of it. But what we learned later was that that wasn't the entire tax. The entire tax covers a lot of different regions, logging equipment and mining equipment and restaurant equipment and trucking
small businesses, anything, any business equipment, medical equipment, grocery stores, their cooling equipment. I mean, any equipment that a business has, construction equipment that they need to do repair on would be taxed.
So on NPR, the governor went on for like an hour-long interview, and someone called in asking that if this farm equipment tax is so bad for farms, then why isn't the exact same tax as equally as bad for logging and mining and restaurants? And this is what Governor Dayton had to say. And this is what Governor Dayton had to say.
Well, I'm not aware of how we've changed anything in taxes that affect loggers or miners or the restaurant industry.
So Governor Dayton used the excuse of not knowing he signed the farm equipment repair tax into law, and now he's using the excuse of he's not aware that the same tax applies to loggers and farmers and loggers and miners and restaurant owners. I mean, is the guy paying attention at all? I mean, when you're signing admitting to signing legislation you haven't read.
Well, I can't obviously speak for what the governor may or may not know.
Can anyone really, Senator?
But I think certainly the legislators knew. It was a topic of debate on the floor of the Senate and the House at the time the bills were passed, and so people knew. I don't think it was a surprise that these taxes were in those bills, and people on our side opposed them, and the Democrats defended them.
So if the governor wants to get rid of this tax because that negatively affects the farmers, and now we know that this same tax negatively affects other businesses.
Right.
Does he want to get rid of it? Now that he's aware, does he want to get rid of it for other businesses?
Well, when we talked with him on Friday, and we presented all three of those business-to-business taxes as part of what we thought should be the agenda, and he was not opposed to dealing with those taxes, and the other Democrats there were not opposed. Their whole objection really is, well, how do you fix the hole in the budget that creates? All three of those taxes in total raise about $300 million in the course of the budget. And so if you take them off the table, then you've got a $300 million problem. And that would become the issue. How do you plug that $300 million hole? And that really was their question. Well, if you want to do that, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And the reason why he proposed only the farm sales tax exemption is that in theory there is money that is not accounted for, that is just on the bottom line, that hasn't been designated for any use, that could be used to pay that, which isn't really true, but that's what he's saying. And so it's an easy thing to say, well, we'll just take that money that isn't being designated for anything else, and we'll use that to fix this little problem. But it's really, in my opinion, a pseudo problem. We've got a $38 billion budget. You're talking $300 million at most, or some lesser amount, depending on how many of those taxes you want to address. Can you find that in some way? Obviously, you can. You can delay implementation of programs. You can cut back the spending on some things. The easiest thing to do in the course of a special session, I think, would be just to go to the reserves. Use that to balance.
Well, the Republicans rebuilt those reserves back up.
There's $650 million in reserves, and you could use those reserves to make the budget balanced. And then in the next legislative session, you can deal with long-term structuring the spending in such a way to deal with it and put the reserve money back. So you can do that.
This is the annoying thing for me with Democrats. That if a tax cut needs to be paid for, apparently, even though that wasn't their money to begin with. But,
well, that's true. That's the parlance of the legislature.
Right. Paul Thiessen, as Speaker of the Minnesota House, is actually on the record on how the warehouse tax should be paid for if they repeal it. In a letter he wrote to the New Ulm Journal, he writes that, I agree with the editorial on one point. If the warehouse tax that the Minnesota Senate demanded is eliminated, we will pay for the repeal with cuts and not another new tax. So Speaker Thiessen, on the record, if we get rid of the warehouse tax, we will pay for it with cuts, which is
more like Paul
and we would agree
with Party with that. Type of rhetoric.
And
on my side.
And there are, and we just, on Friday, before we went into the meeting, Representative Doubt and I sat down with a couple of others, and we just did a sort of a quick, could we find, if we needed to, 150 or a couple $100 million in reductions. And it's pretty easy to do. I mean, there are some things that are, depending on your perspective, you could say, are those really high priority spending items? Could we afford, in terms of perspective, to say, let's delay that, or let's get rid of that spending in favor of doing this tax change that would be beneficial to the whole economy? And that really is the point. These are taxes that are burdening our economy. These are taxes that are going to be driving businesses out of the state. Why don't we fix them now? That is really the issue, and why don't we just find a way to do it? And if there's a will, there's a way. It's not an insurmountable problem.
What blows my mind is that the governor on some level agrees that taxes hurt business and
That's
yet
true.
continues to want to raise taxes. I don't understand it. More with State Senator David Hann when we come back. Give us a call, 651-989-5855.
Broadcasting from the renterswarehouse.com studios, Jack and Ben, Twin Cities News Talk, AM 1130.
Informative, entertaining, relevant. This is the Twin Cities News Talk station. TwinCitiesNewsTalk.com.
Welcome back to the morning show. I'm Jack Tomzak. That is Ben Cruzy. That's your input? We're talking with State Senator David Hann. He's the leader of the Republicans in the Minnesota State Senate. Currently in the minority there, but that will end in a few years, I am sure. Give us a call at 651-989-5855. Senator, we're talking about the fact that you and all the other leaders in the House and Senate sat down with Governor Mark Dayton last week to talk about a special session and agreed on time and a place, and that's about it. Now, my question for you is, why were you and Republican Speaker, got ahead of myself, Minority Leader Kurt Doudt included in that? They don't need you guys to pass anything, do they?
Well, they don't need us to pass anything, but they need us to agree to the agenda if they want to do a special session in one day. The rules require that under normal rules, it takes about 3 or 4 days to process legislation through the House and the Senate, because bills have to be posted. They have to be a certain amount of time between the introduction of the bill and the voting on the bill, first reading, second reading, third reading.
Democrats put in those 24-hour rules on.
Well, it's the rules that are in place to allow the public to have the opportunity to really read the bills and understand what's there. So to get around that, if you want to do a session in one day, you have to suspend the rules, and to suspend the rules, you need a supermajority to do that.
That's it.
And so to get the supermajority, they need our help. So they could decide, for example, to say, well, we want to have a special session, we want to do this stuff, and we don't care about what you Republicans want. And they could call a special session, and then they could do it, but it would take them about 5 days, which from our perspective would be fine, because that would free us to do whatever we wanted. We could do amendments, we could call for hearings, we could just do whatever we wanted to do. We could just do like we would do in a normal session. And they would just have to say no, 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 and force their legislation through, and they would get their way because they have the votes. But as governor, I would never want to do that, because you lose control of the agenda. And in a special session, your objective is to control the agenda, make it happen quickly. So they want our cooperation, they want our help, which gives us a certain amount of leverage in negotiations.
Is it possible that a special session would be called without such an agreement in place?
No.
They won't do it.
I mean, in theory, it's possible, but I think as a practical matter, I don't think any governor would agree to call a special session without having an agreement on what's going to be covered.
Because you guys could just do whatever you want.
That's right. And once you call a session, the legislature is the only body that can end the session. So if you don't have agreement going into it, then you're kind of letting the legislature decide.
They're in charge, yeah.
And so the purpose of the agreement is from the governor's perspective to say, well, here's what's going to happen. We know we're only going to do these things, and we know it's going to end. But if you just say, well, we'll just call the session and let the legislature decide what they're going to do and when it's going to end, well, that could go on for quite some time. And so the governor doesn't want to lose control.
Without an agreement, there's no special session. Can the folks who need the storm relief get relief any other way?
I mean, there's some of these legislators are talking about figuring out a way to do that.
Well, there's some specials. Yeah, they're exploring that. I'm not an expert on the disaster relief laws. There's federal declarations and there's state things, and Commissioner Showalter, MMB commissioner, is looking at whether or not there is a way to provide the relief. It's in terms of the dollars, it's a relatively small amount that would come from the Minnesota budget to provide the matching component. So they're looking into that. We should get an answer from the commissioner the next time we meet of whether or not that is there is a way to do that. But there are a number of members of the Senate and the House that have said, why are we going to do this? It is there's some cost to have a special session, and so they're looking at that to make sure that we can do it.
It's a good thing they're making sure they're spending taxpayer dollars wisely.
Correct. Yes.
My favorite state representative, Ryan Winkler, DFLer, wants to increase minimum wage during a special session. Is that on the table?
No, that is not on the table, and that will not happen. We will not agree to a special session with minimum wage. That will not happen, and that will not be part of the agenda.
You heard it here. All right, Senator Hann, thank you for getting into a room with Mark Dayton and having a conversation. That has got to be
part of my job.
Awful. Awful stuff.
So just frustrating, yeah. Because you don't know if he's going to remember anything from it or at least say he doesn't remember anything from the conversation.
All right, Senator Hann, we'll see you at the State Fair.
Yep, we'll be there.
Yes, we'll be there.
Excellent.
Every day as well. All right, Senator Hann, thank you very much.